This is Understanding U.S. Government. I'm your host, Mr. Giese. In this episode, we will be discussing the topic of presidential succession. The question we'll be trying to answer is what occurs when the president is unable to perform the duties of office. In order to do that, we'll be discussing how the Constitution provides for presidential succession, the constitutional provisions relating to presidential disability, and the role of the vice president in all of this. Let's go ahead and try to discuss this now. When we talk of presidential succession, we are discussing the process by which a presidential vacancy is filled. Basically, who takes over in the instance that a president is impeached, resigns, or dies in office. In the Constitution, it states that the powers and duties were to devolve on the vice president, meaning that the responsibilities go to the vice president, but it's not clear who fills that vacancy. Since the original writing of the Constitution, the vice president does, in fact, fill that vacancy. This is usually why they pick a running mate that has very similar beliefs. Don't get me wrong, there are other reasons or motives for picking a running mate, but that is a discussion for another day. So that solves it, right? Well, what happens if the vice president is unable to fill that vacancy? In that case, the next in line of presidential succession is the Speaker of the House. This is the leader of the House of Representatives and has been appointed by the majority party in that House. So other than regulating daily business in one of the houses of Congress, this position is also next in line for presidential succession behind the vice president. But it doesn't stop there. If the Speaker is unable to fill that vacancy, then the next in line would be the President Pro Tem. This is the person that fills that vacancy of the President of the Senate or the Vice President if the Vice President is unable to be in the Senate. And finally, what would happen if the President Pro Tem is not able to fill the vacancy? Then it goes down to the Cabinet Secretaries in order of the department's creation. For instance, the State Department was created first, so the Secretary of State would be next. The last in line of presidential succession would be that of Homeland Security because that's the newest. But you might be asking yourself, what would happen if none of these were able to fill the vacancy? Well, if that situation arose, we would probably have some real issues, and I don't have the answer to that question. So how was this whole line of presidential succession created? It was created by the Presidential Succession Act of 1947. To be clear, though, this is just to fill the president's vacancy. This line does not move up one spot. For instance, if the vice president fills a vacancy, the speaker doesn't become the vice president. The speaker stays in the position of speaker. So, how is the vice president's vacancy filled? Well, the 25th Amendment helps us out with that. The 25th Amendment officially states that the vice president takes over if the president is unable to fulfill their duties. This could be in the event of forced removal or voluntary recusal. Voluntary recusal would be if the president was needing a surgical operation and would not be able to fulfill their duties, then the vice president would do so until the president was able to once again fulfill their role. And finally, it establishes how to replace the vice president. In this case, the president will nominate the vice president and Congress would then confirm that appointment. So to answer the question of filling the vacancy of the president, it would be through the Presidential Succession Act to fill that vacancy. That is the only position that would be filled through this piece of legislation. Once the president has been established, the 25th Amendment lays out how to fill the vacancy of the vice president, along with a few other things. It is through these two pieces of legislation that the U.S. government has a plan to fill the vacancy of the office of the presidency.